Hello everyone, and welcome to After Alexander. Episode 31, The Question of Pergamon. For what no doubt feels like the umpteenth time during these last few episodes, we're going to have to return to Anatolia. However, this time it is slightly different in that it's also the last time that we'll do so accompanying Antiochus Soter. With that said, let's jump right in. Anatolia was in a precarious position from a Seleukid point of view. As we've seen before, cities had been established by the Seleucids to protect the royal road from raiders, and in an attempt to covertly push back against the incursion of the Ptolemies while avoiding all-out war. In the wake of the First Syrian War, the Seleukid strategy in Anatolia had shifted from outright aggression to this more subtle manoeuvre, which would not have been enough to provoke Ptolemaic retribution. There may have been several reasons for this shift. Antiochus was already in his 50s at this point, and the death of his eldest son may well have sapped his strength or willpower. In addition, the Seleucids had lost a lot of people and resources in the war against the Gauls. The policy of creating and getting hold of new settlements would have gone some way to countering this. The Seleucids were simply not strong enough from a military point of view to retake the kingdoms that had broken away in the early years of Antiochus I's reign. These states had proved troublesome since they had broken away some years before. Mithridates, the king of Pontus, seems to have either facilitated or supported the creation of Galatia to act as a buffer zone between himself and the Seleukid Empire. In turn, Antiochus I seems to have encouraged Greek settlement after the invasion of the Gauls. Presumably, this was an attempt to reconsolidate his hold on Anatolia, in the same way that Greek cities elsewhere will contribute to Hellenization, as we saw in episode 17. The treaty between Antiochus I and Ptolemy II seems to have been respected by the Gauls, who raided the northern kingdoms rather than Seleukid territory during this period. Nonetheless, Anatolia was a volatile region undergoing a delicate balancing act, stabilised by Ptolemaic attention being elsewhere, which we'll come back to at the end of the episode, and the existence of this same treaty between the Ptolemies and the Seleukid kingdom. As you might have guessed from the episode title, the main factor in play this time is going to be Pergamon, ruled over by the eunuch Philoterus. Philoterus had once been a loyal supporter of Lysimachus, but had switched to Seleucus during the latter's invasion of the peninsula in 281 BCE. Pergamon seems to have been nominally within the Seleukid sphere of influence, but had been steadily increasing its power in prior years. Just as Antiochus I had been using city building to his advantage, so Philoterus had been using the exact same tactic to further his own interests and slowly decouple himself from Seleukid orbit. However, Philoterus would die in 263 BCE at around 80 years old. His heir was his nephew Eumenes, who took up his new position and is known to us as Eumenes I. However, the issue with this was that he did this without seeking the approval of Antiochus I, who was still technically his superior. He may have been encouraged in this anti-Seleukid stance by Ptolemy II. This move by Eumenes I effectively served as a declaration of independence, which was too severe an insult for Antiochus I to be able to ignore. Accordingly, Antiochus prepared to strike against Pergamon and remove Eumenes from his territories. I should say that the dates I've seen for this are a little vague, with George Rawlinson citing 263 as the start of hostilities in his 1869 Manual of Ancient History, while the 1911 Encyclopaedia Britannica entry lists 262 BCE. Regardless, the end result is the same. Eumenes was prepared for the inevitable retaliation of the Seleucids and preemptively invaded Seleukid territory, attacking the regional capital of Sardis. It seems that Eumenes' invasion caught Antiochus I off guard and without the full complement of his regional troops. Accordingly, Antiochus I was defeated close to the city in 261 BCE. He seems to have made peace fairly quickly after this, effectively recognising the independence of Pergamon. This would have been unusually rapid for a Seleukid king, perhaps due to his advancing age. Eumenes would subsequently substantially increase the size of his domains. However, Eumenes diplomatically did not use the opportunity to make himself a formal king. After all, this would have proven a further humiliation to the Seleucids and would have prompted further trouble. Despite this lack of a title, though, he basically exercised all the authority of a king, so for all intents and purposes Pergamon was lost from the Seleucid sphere of influence. It's some time after this that Antiochus I died while fighting against the Gauls near Ephesus on the 2nd of June 261 BCE. He died in what for the court at least would have been the year 51 of the Seleukid calendar, after having, in Bevan's words, quote, wrestled with the task bequeathed him by Seleucus for 19 years, end quote, at the age of approximately 62. At the time of his death, he left behind him one surviving son and through him one grandson, although I don't know how many of his granddaughters would have been born at the time. His death meant that this surviving son, now the third generation of Seleukid royalty, succeeded to the throne as Antiochus II. However, his successor faced a difficult situation. The Cremonidean War, which we will cover in a future episode, had kept Ptolemy II preoccupied in Europe and unable to focus on Anatolia for fear of fighting on two fronts. However, it ended in 261 BCE, which would have allowed him to focus on the Seleucids once again. In fact, the war may even have ended because of the death of Antiochus I. The reason for this would be that the peace treaty between Antiochus I and Ptolemy II had now ended. Such treaties held for as long as both rulers who signed it were alive, which was now no longer the case. So, with that, we've arrived. We've reached the end of the reign of Antiochus I. Next time, then, will be our recap episode, and I'll reveal the new epithet I've decided to award him based on my perception of how he's fared. A performance review, if you like. Until then, thank you all for listening. For any questions or comments, feel free to get in touch at the show's email address. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.